from God our Father and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. So sorry about the hat hair going on this morning. So got up this morning and spent a good hour and a half in an ice rink for Trish's practice. So she had goalie practice at 6 a.m. this morning. So that was and that was over in Edina. So it was about four. Alarm was set for 4:30. Think got up at 4:45 in order to get up and get there because you can't just get there and get started. You have to have the time in order to get dressed and get all the hockey gear on and all of that kind of stuff. And then afterwards, got to get the hockey gear off and got to get the clothes on for school and because you can't wear your sweaty gear all day through school. Well, you could, but she's not going to. So anyway, that was the beginning of the morning, and take a shower, then put a hat on for about 2 hours. That'll happen. And so I tried putting it down, but that's as much as I'm going to get. So today we come to First Kings chapter 10. And chapter 10 and 11 here of First Kings is very much the ending now of Solomon's reign. So if we get through 10 and 11, which is the plan, we'll come to the end of the United Kingdom, Saul, David, Solomon, and we'll be coming straight into Rehoboam. Make sure I got the right king. Yep, Rehoboam. So we run straight into Solomon's son, hopefully next week when we get together. So this will be wrapping up Solomon. Now, when we come here to 10, you're kind of looking at, okay, now this is the high point and the high things going on with Solomon. And then chapter 11, Solomon's failings that go forth. And that's the ending of Solomon's reign. And it ends on a very dark, brooding type note. So today we kind of get to the high point and one of the high points and the low point of Solomon's reign. Because really the high point would be the temple and its dedication. Now we're kind of looking to the high point of his as king taking place. So we come to First Kings 10, and this section here probably dates to somewhere in the 930s BC. So Solomon's reign was 40 years. The first 20 of those years was Solomon becoming king, establishing his kingdom, building the temple, building his own house as well, and doing all of that building that happened and took place. That'd be the first 20 years. The third 10 years, so basically, the 930s of his reign. In essence, what those years are basically, it's the growth taking place, especially financially, within the kingdom. And the last 10 years of his reign basically then is the spiritual decline that happens with Solomon and starts the spiritual decline taking place for the whole people of Israel. Because as the king starts declining away from the Lord, what happens to the people? They start to decline and fall away from the Lord. That's why when you run into the prophets, especially the pre-exile prophets, I think Isaiah, they are the harshest in their condemnation of the kings and the priests and the prophets. And they're the hardest against them because they're the ones who should know better. They're the ones who are leading the people away from the Lord. And so if you're leading others away from the Lord, the higher the condemnation that happens and takes place. Very similar when we get to Christ. And he says, if anyone leads one of these little children away from me, it'd be better if he had a millstone around his neck and thrown into the sea, right? Why is the greater condemnation on that person? Because they led people away from the Lord. And so the greater condemnation is on those that would lead people away from the Lord, especially kings, priests, prophets, thinking especially at this time. So, with all of that having been said, we first come here to 10, and this kind of brings up, knowing what's going to come up in 11, it brings up kind of the thought, what if? With all of what we're going to go through here in chapter 10, what if chapter 11 never happened? What if Solomon had stayed with the Lord despite his failings and stayed with the Lord throughout his life? Where would the people of Israel have been? Where would the kingdom have been? Where would the word of the Lord and the glory of the Lord been spread among the people if he had stayed? We don't know. But it kind of brings up the what if the last 10 years of his reign had never happened? So we come here to the high point of the kingship of Solomon. And I think we went clockwise last time, so we'll go counterclockwise this time. So would you read just verse 1?
Now, when the Queen of Sheba heard the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to test him.
So here you have the Queen of Sheba. And there's a couple of different thoughts of where this is at. Most of the modern commentators uh, think that she was probably more down near Yemen, which is just across the strait from Ethiopia. Others kind of think that she was actually Ethiopia. Uh, but a lot of the commentators kind of think, the Arab Peninsula, where you've got Saudi Arabia as the largest area. Think the very southern portion, because you've got Saudi Arabia kind of it's a rectangle on its side. The very southern port is Yemen. That's where all the Houthi stuff is happening right now, is in Yemen. So the most likely scenario, possibly over in Egypt, but really you're talking across a very small strait. So the distance, it's across water, but the distance between Yemen and Ethiopia is just a few kilometers. I think maybe 10 kilometers, something of that nature. So not far at all. So that's in that area. However, you're talking, you know, just a few miles distance between the two. And yet, when you get to it, it's about 1,200 miles between Yemen and Jerusalem. Might not seem that long when you look at a map, but when you start actually counting the miles, it's a long haul going all of that way down Jerusalem down there. So you're talking a long ways away. So we'll just say over 1,000 miles. Now, if people know who you are 1,000 miles away, what does it say about your fame and reputation? It's way out there, isn't it? It is all over the place. And so just thinking a few miles away, how many of you know the governor of Wyoming? What's the name of the governor of Wyoming? That's closer. That's closer than this would have been. And we've got the TV, and we've got internet, and we've got phones, and we've got everything else, right? And yet we don't know the governor over there. Now, without all those modern conveniences, give it a good 1,000 miles, 1,200-ish, depending upon exactly how you put it. And in these days, his reputation had gone that far. That says a lot for how much his reputation had gone out and all over the place, right? So that's just giving a point that with his reputation, it was all over the known world. Who is Solomon? Everybody knew Solomon, and everybody had a thought about who Solomon was. So David may have been more of a local figure. When Solomon, his son, comes forward, he becomes an international figure, where basically, it's not just the people around, but all the people all over the known world know who Solomon is. And as we get forward in this, basically, you could say at a minimum from the opposite side of India to Spain to Central Africa up to the Ukraine, Moscow area of Russia. At a minimum, that area knew who Solomon was. So that just says that, in case you're wondering, that's a big area. And so it spread all over and probably beyond what I just said. But I can say at a minimum, that area, we know who Solomon was. So when you come to the Queen of Sheba here, that's a long ways away and shows just how much his reputation had gone throughout the world. And that's heard the fame of Solomon. And you notice the incredible words there concerning the name of the Lord. So remember, why is God blessing and working through the people of Israel? So people might know his name. Whenever we're looking at things like this, we always need to remember that beginning portion. What is God's will? What is God's desire? God's desire is that all people know him and believe. That is God's will and desire. Now, sinful human beings thwart that because he allows us to be able to do so, unfortunately. Nevertheless, she heard the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord. And we'll get to a lot of the other things, but that's the number one thing. God's name was known. And so when it's talked about, God wants the people of Israel to be this light on a hill so that people from all over the world see the light, flock to it, and hear the word of the Lord. This is almost the ultimate point, this text right here, of bring the people, see the light of Solomon, come to the name of the Lord, see what the Lord has done, and prayerfully believe and be his people. Then they have to go back home. And the prayer would be then, as the Queen of Sheba goes home, she shares the word of the Lord that's been brought to her as she goes back home. Uh, Similar thought process when you get to the New Testament, you have the Ethiopian eunuch who was head of the treasury in Ethiopia. He comes up to Jerusalem of the Jewish faith, hears of Jesus, sees that Isaiah is talking about Jesus, talking about the Messiah, and he goes back. And we're kind of left in the New Testament of the in the book of Acts of the of him going back to Ethiopia, going back to his job. Now, knowing that, the oldest, you could say, if you want to call something a denomination, the oldest denomination in the world would probably be, in my opinion, the Coptic Church, Coptic. And with what I just said, where would the Coptic Church be centered?
Egypt.
Ethiopia. So southern, upper Egypt, and Ethiopia. So in the mountain areas, bringing it on down. So you've got the because throughout history of Egypt, you got upper and lower Egypt, and upper Egypt flows back and forth with Ethiopia right up here. Lower Egypt oftentimes is separated. And the stuff that we usually think of lower of Egypt is lower Egypt, northern Egypt, pyramids, Great Library, Sphinx, the Great Lighthouse. Those would be northern or lower Egypt, is where those would be. Coptic Church would be centered upper Egypt and Ethiopia. And where one was and the other, those flowed over the years, exactly where they meshed over time. So here she comes, and she comes to test him with hard questions. Now, the Hebrew here, the thought process that we have, test works good in English. I'm going to test you in order to see if you really know this stuff. The actual Hebrew word would be more closely translated as riddle. So when you bring somebody a riddle, you're seeing what are they able to do? So, especially thinking the Sphinx, thinking with Greek mythology and other mythologies, the Sphinx was the one that would ask certain questions, and then people came and had to answer. So the Sphinx was kind of a questioner that happened. She brought forward riddles. What would you say about this? What would you say about that? So test works, but riddle. So kind of think right in that vicinity. These riddle questions in order to, and we'll see what Solomon does with that. But that's what she comes, and she's going to see. Do you really know your stuff? Are you really wise and knowing of these things? So that's kind of the beginning portion of our reading here. Uh, any other thoughts there in verse 1? Let's read 2 and 3.
She came to Jerusalem with a very great encampment with camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones. When she came to Solomon, she told him all that was on her mind. And Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing hidden from the king that he could not explain to her.
So, probably two main things to look in there. First of all, the main point that's brought forward is she comes to Solomon. And as she comes to Solomon, she asks all of these test questions, all these riddles that she brings forward. Well, if this, then what? So, kind of the in Greek mythology with the Sphinx, the age-old riddle is what walks on four legs in the morning, two legs at noontime, three legs in the evening. What's the answer? Man, you got it. Yep. Man walks on four as he's a baby, walks on two at midday, and has a cane at evening. And so that's the Sphinx riddle that sometimes is brought forward. So she brought all these riddles, all these questions, all these thoughts, laid them out before Solomon. He answered them all. So she probably spent a lot of time. What should I ask him? What should I do? Get all the wise men, figure this out. Oh, yeah, this, yeah, there. Got it? Cool. So, in other words, he knew his stuff. So she tested him, and he passed more than you could ever have expected or anticipated. But the other one I want to bring here is she is coming to Solomon in order to kind of see, is this true that you are so wise and you know all these things? However, what's the first reason why she probably was there? Do you know why what was the first reasoning why she probably went there?
She would impress him with all of her riches.
Impress him. But even more basic, it was a business trip. It was a mercantile trip. So remember, at the very end of chapter 9, remember, these chapters were added much later. At the end of chapter 9, King Solomon built a fleet of ships at Ezron-Geber, which is near Eliath, on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom. So he built a whole fleet. He built a port, all of that. So you've got the Red Sea. Now, actually, when we get to our Lenten service, it'll be going through the Red Sea. But Solomon didn't have the ships going through the Red Sea like the people of Israel. Instead, he had the ships go on the Red Sea. So here you are, you've got the Red Sea and everything, and you go down and you follow along. And on that peninsula, that's the Arabian Peninsula, you've got the Red Sea right there. And then you've got the Arab Sea over here. Several different parts over there. And so you got and then the peninsula is between the two. And then on this portion, you get down into the Indian Ocean. So you get down to the Indian Ocean there. And so you're here on the top point of the Red Sea. That's where you build your port. That's where you have a fleet of ships. What are you going to do? You're going to go down the Red Sea, right? You're not going to build a fleet of ships and let's say, cool, we got them sitting in port. We're good. You're going to use them. So with all your fleet of ships, you're going to go down the Red Sea and out into the ocean to other places, right? Now you go down the Red Sea, and where are you? What do you have to go between? Ethiopia and Yemen. So all of his ships that were there in verse 9 were going right by her place. And she had ships and she had ports and she had all of those things. So here's this king you hear so much about. All of a sudden, he's built this port. He's got this fleet of ships. They're all going by us. Well, what should I do? Let's go visit. So this is a business trip first. And then we'll go see what this king is actually like and about as well. So you get all of those things that she brought there. What was the point of bringing all of these things to Solomon? Just to say, you're wise, here's lots of stuff. There's a very human reasoning. Let's create trade relations between our countries. You're going by us anyway. Let's have good relations between us as we go forward. And especially with Yemen, that is the huge portion of their economy. Because if you go, I mean, this is before oil was found. If you go north, what kind of land do you run into? Desert.
Yes.
So you're not going to have a lot of trade going across the going straight across the big desert. You're going to do your trade by ship. So that was their lifeblood, was trade by ship and vessels. So she goes up to Solomon, and you have this business trip, and we're going to make everything happen. Part of why she travels 1,200 miles to go see him. And she's there. So that's the things that are taking place within that. And so she's there. She asks all these questions. He answers every last one of them. So let's go to verse 4 and 5.
And when the queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his officials, and the attendance of his servants, their clothing, his cupbearers, and his burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord, there was no more breath in her.
She saw how incredible all of this was, right? Now, Solomon gathered all of this, and we're going to get into all this wealth in just a little bit here. But we'll just say he gathered a lot that's there. What's one of the problems that you run into when you have these foreign dignitaries from foreign lands come and you show them all this good stuff you got? They want this, they want the good stuff, right? And that's part of the issues that come forward for Israel until finally the Babylonians bring them and take them off into exile. Is because they come forward, look what they got. Let's go there. And so, again, one of the saddest verses in the Bible, in the spring, the time of the year when kings go to war. That's one of the saddest sentences, I think, in all, and that's human beings, unfortunately. That's sin in the world. But we can drive our chariots. Let's go to war now. That's about as sad a thought process as you can really run into. But she sees all of this stuff. And you notice she sees his wisdom, the house, his buildings, his food, the officials, the attendants, the clothing, the cupbearers. And you notice the last one, and his burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord. And so, in other words, she saw the worship that happened and took place. Solomon, and we're going to see this in the next verses here, but Solomon does not go forward and just say, look, I've got all the smarts. I've got all this wisdom. He puts forward and says, and this is where my wisdom comes from. This is where all of this comes from. It comes from the Lord. It's not because I'm so grandiose. It's because of the Lord. And so the breath was taken from her when she saw what the Lord had done. Any other kind of thoughts there in those couple of verses? I'll grab verse 6 through 7 then. And she said to the king, The report was true that I heard in my own land by your words and by your wisdom. But I did not believe the reports until I came with my own eyes and had seen it. And behold, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and prosperity surpassed the report that I heard. So she had heard all these. This is incredible. She didn't believe that it could be that good, that he could be that wise. There could be this, how much blessings, physically speaking, had been given to the people of Israel. And yet she goes forward, and it wasn't even half as much as what had been told to me. And so she comes and she sees all of these things that had been happened and taken place. Now we get to the next verses 8 through 10, the rest of the paragraph.
Happy are your men, happy are your servants who continually stand before you and hear you whisper. Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and set you on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, he has made you king, that you may execute justice and righteousness. Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold and very great quality of spices and precious stones. Never again came in such an abundance of spices as the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon.
So she comes forward and says, look at all of this. And really, this is almost a statement of faith that happens here. It could be a statement of faith, or it might be just her going forward and stating what she had heard was happening and going forward. We're not, so she could have, at the end result here, been a believer, or she could have just been deciding that Yahweh was one of the many gods that are out there. We're left not knowing. It could be either one. Either this is one of the many gods, or this is the God. So this could, I mean, you got to vastly, because we don't know for certain, be a statement of faith. If she believed, this would be a good statement of faith. She goes forward, and so she says, happy are your people. Happy is this. Changes it around to blessed then. Blessed be the Lord who has set you over Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, he has made you king. So you see, she's saying all of these things were done by the Lord. And she has these specific words in here that the people of Israel use for the Lord as well. So you have the specific words that are used there. So she heard his, you could say, evangelism. As she came there, Solomon was not just saying, look at all my gold, look at all my buildings. He brought her for the sacrifices at the temple. He spent the time as well teaching her his faith, teaching the faith of Israel. So he did both of these taking place. And she heard him. She heard what he had said. The Lord has done this. The Lord has made this. Now, like I said, you could read this as being, okay, now she believes she's a follower of Yahweh, a possibility. God is just one of these gods. He's blessed you, and I'll go and have my gods bless me, a possibility. So it could be either way. I would like to believe that she believed in the Lord and him alone. But this is also getting towards the time where Solomon himself starts incorporating worship of other gods. But that's coming up here on to chapter 11. So we'll wait on that. And then she gives him lots of gold, lots of spices, lots of precious gems that are going forward. And a talent of gold, about 75 pounds, 120 or 120 talents of gold, 120 times 75. You can figure out the math. That's a lot of gold. That is a lot of gold. Somewhere in the nature of about 5 tons of gold. That's a bunch. So if somebody comes up and says, you got 5 tons of gold, yeah, I think I'll come in and try to take Jerusalem. That's part of the issue that comes up and takes place. So, kind of any other thoughts there in that gift? Well, and then lastly, remember this is also a business trip. So she comes up, I give you all of these things. Let's keep doing trade. And then in the verses, then he's going to reciprocate and he's going to give her back for her to take home as well. So I give you good stuff, you give me good stuff. Awesomeness. Okay. Now that that's done, we can go for now we can cement our relationship as trading partners. And we can both make lots of more money going forward. So it was also that business trip as well. Um, any other thoughts before we look at some more of the blessings and gifts? Verse 11 and 12.
Hiram, which brought gold from Ophir, brought from Ophir a very great amount of almond wood and precious stones. And the king made of the almond wood supports for the house of the Lord and for the king's house, also lyres and harps for the singers. No such almond wood has come to be seen to this day.
So again, you notice, and then it talks, moreover, the fleets brought more gold and stuff. So here she came for this purpose. It was a business trip as well. You have fleets before this, you have fleets at the end. So this is also, like I said, a business trip as well, getting all this trade happening and taking place, and a very great amount of gold from Ophir. We don't know exactly where Ophir is. However, it was known for very fine gold. So that was something that it was known for. Sometimes you hear this place is known for that, but we can't quite put it on a map today. And once you get out into the ocean, then there's a lot of territory you could go to where this could be. Suffice to say, very fine gold was brought in, and very far removed wood was brought in for use as well. So that's part of all that's happening. And then we've got verse 13.
And King Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba all that she desired, whatever she asked, besides what was given her by the bounty of King Solomon. So she turned and went back to her own land with her servants.
So here, I give you all of this stuff. He comes back, I'll give you all of this stuff. Now we got the trade. Let's make the gold and the wood and all those things and the precious stones flow back and forth. So let's make this all happen. You can almost think the spice trade type stuff. What was the corporation that England had that went around the world?
East India.
The East India Company. That's it. Yep. You can almost think something of that nature, where the spices and the gold flow throughout the world. And the spices are worth a lot as you go forward. And we'll see this a little bit coming forward too. Because the spices, one of the things that somebody would say that they could not imagine going back 1,000 years would be going into our supermarkets and going into these spice racks and seeing all of those spices that are there. I mean, that by itself would be the ultimate wealth if you go back not too long ago. The spices. And that would go back all the way back here too. So you notice gold and spices are kind of the number one, number two things that are out there. One of them, and we'll get to this in just a little bit in this next section, even like so spices, think things like cinnamon, things of that nature is kind of what we're looking at. So here's this. I'll give you more, you give me more. Okay, now go back and let's have this cemented our trade. However, she brings back what he has taught about his God as well. So here she comes forth for business. Did she come for exactly the right reason? No. Did the Lord bless her with the right stuff when she came? Yes. You can just think for when we gather together for worship too. Is everybody that gathers together for worship there for the right reason? Not everybody. Are they in the right place? Yes. Absolutely. So now we get to the next step where you're again thinking, what could have been if chapter 11 had never happened? All these people are coming, all the Queen of Sheba, 1,200 miles away, coming here, seeking wealth, but hearing the blessings and hearing the word of the Lord. What if? Now we get to all the wealth that the Lord gathered together also. And so let's read verse 14 and 15. I think it's my turn, right? Now, the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Besides that, which came from the explorers, from the business of the merchants, and from all the kings of the west, and from the governors of the lands. So there you have the amount of gold that came in. Now, you get forward into the New Testament, and you get to 666, like in Revelation, right? Now, some people say, well, that's the number of Nero. Yeah, you can finagle it a little bit that way. I think it kind of looks back a little bit more towards this because Revelation constantly looks back to the Old Testament. It keeps looking back to the Old Testament because the whole concept with Revelation is you're looking back at what has happened and you're backing up into the future. So you've seen what the Lord has done. Let's us see how God will act as we go forward. So that's the concept. And at the point when that was written, here's all the concept. Look at the Old Testament, what the Lord has done. Now, this is how the Lord works, acts, and will bring us forward as we go forward. So you've got all of that thought process happening. Here you have 666 talents of gold. So you have this last piece here. Look at all this wealth. Then, as soon as this listing goes through, look at all these things. Then, the first verse of chapter 11, now, or you could say, however, or you could say, and then things changed. And so here's all of this wealth, and what did wealth and wives and everything else, and what ended up happening to Solomon, the wisest person who had ever been put forward? It turned him away from the Lord. And so, with all of this, how easy to turn away from the Lord when things or people or other stuff can lead us astray. And so you get the 666. I think that fits pretty well when it talks about that in Revelation and uses those numbers, the things that turn us away from the Lord. And great wealth is one way. God gave Solomon incredible wealth, and he ended up being led away from the Lord. And so now we're going to get to all of the things that happen. And 666 talents, that's about 25 tons of gold. Lots and lots of gold that came in 1 year. And that's besides all the other things that were happening. So right there where you have Israel, and they didn't use this so much, you were kind of at a crossroads. So down in this direction, you've got Egypt. Down to the south, you got the Arabian Peninsula, Queen of Sheba, all of those things. You go to the north, you have the Fertile Crescent that goes up north through Iraq to Iran to India. You have this way that goes then up into the Mediterranean Sea. You've got the Mediterranean Sea where you're able to get boats, especially up in Tyre and Sidon, in order to go all the way off to Spain. So in other words, you're right at this crossroads of all of this trade that happens. And that is a lot of trade that takes place. And so with everything here, where's this extra money coming from? Taxes, tolls, tariffs. And we've heard a little bit about tariffs lately. Nothing new. That was going on here 3,000 years ago. You're going to bring goods to Israel or through Israel? Well, we need a cut as it comes forward. So you have the tariffs, the taxes, the tolls, however you want to word it, all these things happening, and this brings in more and more wealth that happens and takes place. And so all of this is coming on in. So now we're going to kind of, in the last 10 minutes, you kind of add more and more of the wealth that happened to Solomon. Any other thoughts right there? Verse 16 and 17.
King Solomon, oh no, we're going
No,
up.
yep. So, Dan, your turn.
Yeah.
King Solomon made 200 large shields of beaten gold. 600 shekels of gold went into each shield. And he made 300 shields of beaten gold. 3 minas of gold went into each shield. And the king put them in the house of the horse of Lebanon.
So he makes all these 200 large shields, 300 small shields. The large shields would have been about 2 pounds each of gold put into them. The small shields would have been about 2 pounds of gold put into them. So you've got a significant amount of gold put into them. So you got 500 shields of different, obviously, this is decoration. So you've got so much gold and so many things around that you don't even have to worry about building actual real shields. You can make 500, right? 200, 300. Yep. You can make 500 shields just to decorate this area where people come on in, right? That's pretty extravagant for what you've got. Now, later on, when we get to further on in Kings, you at times have armies that start to come up, and then the kings pay off the armies to have them go away. And at one point, these shields are given away in order to say, how about if we just give you all of these shields, will you leave us alone? Okay. So this is then used to kind of, okay, here's the shields. And then what the kings do is then they make weak facsimiles of those shields. So instead of these gold shields, they're used basically as ransom material to have other armies leave them. Yeah. But think 500 shields all around, hundreds upon hundreds of pounds of gold just to have up on your pillars as they're around you. That's a lot going on. Now we go up to verse 18 through 20.
Also made a great ivory throne and overlaid it with the finest gold. The throne had 6 steps, and the throne had a round top. And on each side of the seat were armrests and 2 lions standing beside the armrests, while 12 lions stood there, one on each end of a step on the 6 steps. The like of it was never made in any kingdom.
So he made this incredible throne of ivory with lions going off. And so he's up there, this incredible throne, all of ivory. And then you've got a lion here. Obviously, they're fake lions. And then the 6 steps, and you've got lions going all the way down to where they're at. You can imagine the impression this would give to somebody coming in there, right? And the ivory, there's no elephants in Israel. It was all imported. So all of this ivory for this incredible throne, you'd either be looking at more sub-Sahara Africa. North Sahara had some, but not as much as when you get sub-Sahara Africa, or getting over towards India. So you got your elephants and things of that nature. Most likely elephants are where they got the ivory. So it's probably sub-Sahara Africa or over here or India area where they got the ivory. So this is very foreign that they got all this to build this magnificent throne for everybody to see the king as he sits upon it. So this is incredible wealth. Not just that you have something pretty cool, but from far away and remote, it's been brought and built this incredible thing. So you can just kind of imagine what that throne may have been like. And treasure hunters galore over the years have tried to find these things because they want wealth. So you've had people, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find where that throne of Solomon is. I'm going to go out and find where the lost mines of Solomon are at. I'm going to go off and I'm going to find the Ark of the Covenant. I'm going to go off and I'm going to find gold. So these are some passages here where treasure hunters have said, whoa, I'm going to find that now. And some people have tried to find that the ivory throne. Where it's at, who knows? Probably, most likely, uh, given away at some point to have an army leave them, or broken up and sold in pieces. Most likely the latter is what happened at some point. So here you have this incredible, ornate everything. And then you get, or did it, was that in, trying to think here, was this, yeah, it was in these verses. Oh, come on, where was that? Great ivory throne, or is it the next verse? Oh, it's to come. Okay, so let's read verse 21 to 22. Whose turn? Yes, sirs? Okay.
All King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. Silver was not considered as any in the days of Solomon. For the king had a fleet of ships of Tarshish at sea with the fleet of Hiram. Once every 3 years, the fleet of ships of Tarshish used to come bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks.
And so you've got all the stuff. So he's got all these ships. They go off, they do all this trading, they go from this place to that place. Had to be very trustworthy people because they were dealing with huge amounts. And just kind of a couple of them to point out there. I already talked about the ships, but bringing gold and silver. I mean, we kind of know that. So much gold that silver was like a secondhand thing. So it's like kind of like, well, here's the change over here, the silver. All of his vessels were of gold. And later on, those vessels were also given away to armies to have them to leave them alone. Then you run into the ivory. So you got the ivory, and that's probably going all the way to India, all the way to South Africa area in order to gather that. The apes and the peacocks, and peacocks are India. So you do not find, so you've got basically all of Africa, good chunks of Europe, all the way at least to Spain, maybe all the way up to what we would call England today, all the way off at a minimum to India and Ceylon, which we call Sri Lanka today. And if you go to the and you look for CEYLON in the spice rack, that's where you'll find cinnamon. So a lot of cinnamon is in the nation we call Sri Lanka today. So that was one of the spices that was out there. And so can you almost imagine you're in Israel and you don't have anything like this, and you've got apes or monkeys. I mean, probably a little bit of both. And then you've got peacocks. So you've got the monkeys, you got the peacocks, you've got the ivory, you've got the gold, you've got, I mean, it's just getting the image of all of this taking place that's happening. The peacocks is the one that always kind of gets to me. And then we've got the next verse is 23 through 25. My turn. Thus King Solomon excelled all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom, And the whole earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put into his mind. Each one of them brought his present, articles of silver and gold, garments, myrrh, spices, horses, and mules, so much year by year. So they keep coming. They keep wanting to hear. They're probably coming mostly of the wealth, but no matter why they come, he gives to them his wisdom, and this wisdom is directing to the Lord. So he uses this to share the word of the Lord. So you have people from the ends of the earth, that's known, coming to hear Solomon and to hear what's going on and to bring that wisdom back home where they're at. And so you've got all of these things happening and taking place. And then you've got verse 26. Dan, would you read verse 26?
And Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen whom he stationed in the chariot cities and with the king in Jerusalem.
And so he uses all this and he says, and we're going to make our army strong. And so here you have basically the tanks of the day. Here are our tanks, these chariots that we're going to bring forward, and 1,400 chariots. They all had to be imported. So you got these chariots and these horses and the horsemen, and he makes cities in order to make sure they're there. So they're in cities, they're in Jerusalem, and he's got this whole army now set forward. And so now we have the weapons that we need to defend ourselves against whoever comes on in against us. The unfortunate thing is he does all of this with the weapons because now we're starting to see, okay, where is he putting his trust? In the horses and the chariots and the armies that are going to go forward. And we're starting to see a lack of trust at this part now of trust in the Lord. Because the Lord constantly says, I'm the one who's going to save you. How are we going to conquer Jericho? March around it and blow a ram's horn. That's how you'll conquer Jericho. Not by your incredible army, but by the Lord. How are you going to get out of Egypt? Plagues by the Lord, not by you. How are you going to get out away from Pharaoh's army? Going to cut open the Red Sea. Solomon. Now we're going to have full war armies that can go forward. So now he gets the tanks and the armies that take place. And I'll just kind of wrap up with the last verses here. So, verse 27. And the king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stone, and he made cedar as plentiful as the sycamore in the Shephelah. You notice the specific wording that changes here. All of this before was the Lord has done, the Lord gave, the Lord brought forth, the Lord has done. Now, the king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stone. So now you're starting to see this changing. That's going to go right into chapter 11 next week. Now, look what I have done. I have made, I have, and now you're running into trouble. He's getting in the way. And 28 and 29. And still smart. Solomon import of horses was from Egypt and Cu, and the king's traders received them from Cu at a price. A chariot could be imported from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150. And so, through the king's traders, they were exported to all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Syria. So, in other words, they would bring all of this. He had all these for himself. I'll import these horses and these chariots, and then I'll take them and I'll export them up here to these other foreign kings up north. So, in essence, what was King Solomon right there? He was a weapons trader. So, a part of his wealth came from buying and selling weapons, which here you'll be talking about the ultimate weapons of the day, which would be the chariots. Then so there you see some of the cracks, wrinkles, things happening. And then chapter 11 next week, where we see then the basic spiritual complete fall of King Solomon. But that'll be next week. Ready for next week. Anything else before we wrap up right there? Let's end with a prayer. Lord God, Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for all the blessings and gifts that you give to us. Help us, Lord, in the midst of all these blessings and gifts, to remain humble and completely